Kevin Mitchell is a lover of food. He's a chef, culinary historian, and a scholar. Now he's a co-author of a book about South Carolina signature foods, its recipes, and their stories. Today, I talk one-on-one with Chef Mitchell for this edition of Quintin's Close-Ups. And if you haven't already, subscribe to my YouTube channel and like Quintin's Close-Ups on Facebook. Chef Kevin Mitchell, welcome to the award-winning Quintin's Close-Ups.
Hello, how are you?
Oh, I'm doing great. Needless to say, you are a chef, a scholar, an educator, a culinary historian, the voice of enslaved cooks, a Culinary Institute of America graduate, an Ole Miss graduate, lover of food. Who else is Chef Kevin Mitchell these days?
Well, you can add an author to that list. First book released back out in October. Taste the State, South Carolina's signature foods, their stories and their recipes, which is a book that's dedicated to the ingredients and also the dishes that make South Carolina food what South Carolina food is.
Yes, indeed. As a matter of fact, you are the co-author of that particular book, as you mentioned. What made you put down the spoon and pick up a writing pen to write this book?
The writing bug actually came when I went to the University of Mississippi to get my master's degree. Because, of course, anyone that knows when you go get a graduate degree, you have to write and write and write and continue to write even more. So the program, I actually wrote my master's thesis, which allowed me to be the voice for enslaved cooks. Also talk about the contributions of these enslaved cooks, the African diaspora, the ingredients, and also the techniques. So when I returned from the University of Mississippi back in 2018, I had reconnected with my co-author, David Shields, and he said, hey, let's write a book. And the book actually came from a conversation he had with the University of South Carolina Press, who originally wanted him to write a book that was more like the top 10 hits of South Carolina food. And David actually refused the initial conversation. And so they called him back and said, hey, what do we need to do to get you to sign on and write this book? And so he said, well, if I do this, I need to take a deep dive into South Carolina food. So looking at more than just 10 things, writing it also with a chef, and then it has to be Kevin Mitchell, just based on the relationship that we had and the many other projects we've done up until that point.
Wow. Okay, how have conversations about Southern foods that has been met with passion and debate?
Well, I mean, passion is always involved when you talk about food, where it comes from, who produces it, and the debate sometimes comes from who was cooking it and who should get the honor and the praise for this food. So that's where the conversations come in with enslaved cooks and even freed cooks beyond that, who really laid down the foundation for what we know of today as Southern food. Like, you cannot speak about food or even Southern food without speaking about the enslaved African American, so on and so forth.
What is the foundation of Southern food today?
Southern food today is, it's building upon that, once again, that foundation that these cooks established, hundreds of years ago, looking at the ingredients specifically of the African diaspora. So, we look at okra, we look at corn, which is kind of more of a byproduct or an influence on the Native American. We look at watermelon, we look at rice, right? Yes. We got to talk about rice specifically in this area. You cannot mention Southern food or, the food of the Gullah Geechee culture without mentioning rice. So that foundation, chefs like myself have been able to build upon. But for me, it's always making sure that whether it's me or other chefs, that we honor the people in which produced that food, cultivated the ingredients, grew the ingredients that we celebrate today.
And what particular summer meal do you honor today?
I honor more. It's more about ingredients for me.
Mm.
So I honor okra and black eyed peas, and black eyed peas has a very special place because that was one of the first things that my grandmother taught me to cook when I was 6 years old. And a lot of people know or don't know my passion for food and wanting to become a chef came from spending those hours next to her in a kitchen at 6 years old. I come from a single parent home. I have three brothers, so my mom, of course, worked to take care of four boys. So we spent a lot of time with my grandmother. My grandmother would allow and let my brothers go outside and play and do all those things that young boys do. And she would make me stay in the house and learn how to cook. And at 6 years old, I didn't necessarily understand why. And I had to ask, well, Grandma, how come I can't go outside and play? And she would sit me down and say, well, one day I'm not going to be here, or your mother's not going to be here to cook your meals, wash your clothes, and do all those things that you're learning to do now. So you need to learn to do it. And my initial response was, well, what about the other three that are outside playing? They don't need to know how to do these things. And I just really believe that she saw something in me to help push me and drive me into, wanting to be a chef, and then moving forward, coming to Charleston and understanding the Gullah Geechee culture and recreating that Nat Fuller dinner I did in 2015 opened up the door for me to want to really understand, the stories of the people, stories of those, enslaved cooks, the ones we knew, the names that we knew, and then also, of course, the names that we didn't know. So I always tell people, as far as I'm concerned, I am the name, I am the face, I am the voice for those, specifically the ones that we don't
What more, chef, have you learned about the Gullah Geechee culture through food?
know. Well, I just learned that to me, it's the truest food on the planet. Where it comes from. Having this influence from people that were forcibly brought here from West Africa. Whether it's Sierra Leone, Senegal, Gambia. Those places, for one, that were rice growing regions. So that, just really understanding that food is the foundation for everything. And we, once again, I always will say, giving the honor and praise to those people who created it. And, my real first taste of it was, when I first moved to Charleston and I ran the test kitchen for Charlotte Jenkins' Gullah Cuisine cookbook, and really working with her and understanding the beauty of the culture, the simplicity, but yet still the complexity of that food and what it means to that community. And I feel like I was allowed in to the community, because I'm from off, like people say. I'm from the north. I'm from New Jersey, and people um, tease me and say, "Well, how can you talk about this food?" And I say, I'm able to talk about this food because people like Shirley Jenkins, BJ Dennis,
Yes.
who have allowed me in and brought me in as family and allowed me to talk about this food as if it is who I really
Are you as a chef?
am. As a chef, I'm someone who is very aware and very much into education, um, learning the history and honoring the history, learning where the products come from,
Mm.
always wanting to develop a relationship with that farmer or producer, because having that relationship and understanding where the food comes from, and specifically who produced it makes me a better chef, which in turn makes me a better educator for my students here at the culinary school.
Absolutely. And what are the complexities of Southern food today?
The complexities of Southern food. Um, I mean, basically, it's just the conversation of
Mm,
getting people to understand where it comes from, who it comes from, and how, for me, how the food was birthed out of this atrocity, this time of atrocity in our history, but how we were still able to persevere and create this beautiful food despite our condition.
wow. And since your book has been released, Chef, what relationships have you developed with farmers here in the Low Country?
Um, well, my relationships have been further developed. I mean, before the book came out, I was, back in 2020, I was designated as a South Carolina chef ambassador, which allowed for me to learn about more about the local farmers here in the state, and it also allowed for me to use their products, and also specifically allow for me to showcase, the black farmers, the black producers of food who sometimes often get um, they often are vanished or they disappear from the table, so to speak, because a lot of people don't know about them. And
Mm,
it was an honor for me to have that designation for 2 years to be able to do an event where I can feature, Joseph Field's farm produce in a dish that I'm making, or peculiar pig farm using their hogs, and also of course using other smaller farmers don't who are not out there as far as the big box producers.
which black farmer chef resembles you as a chef?
Um, I always lean towards Joseph Field. Um, Joseph Field is, to me, he's the patriarch of black farmers in the state. So anytime I want to, or I'm doing an event, I have to reach out to him. And there are others that are out there, but I've used his stuff a lot. I've done actually two video profiles at the farm, so people know who he is. And then there's others. Is Roland Chalmers, who's out in Hardyville, who is, I believe, one of the first black farmers growing rice. Right? How incredible is that when we always see our counterparts, growing rice. Now, there's a huge undertaking to get black farmers to produce rice, and how wonderful that is.
Where are the black farmers who are actually producing rice around the country?
Well, I mean, like I mentioned, Roland Chalmers in Hardyville. There's, actually a really good farmer friend of mine, Chef Matthew Rayford out in Brunswick, Georgia. I mean, they're out there. It's just like that question when people ask, well, where are the black chefs? We're out here. You just have to like open your eyes and come and find us, because we're here. We're producing, we're cooking, we're doing really great things. And, the light needs to be shined on all of them.
How do you like that shine on these black farmers and chefs?
Well, I mean, I love it. It's for me, it's long overdue. We've been the backbone of this industry. This industry, as far as being a chef, employs more minority, more African Americans than any other industry. And so the shine is welcomed, um, and I want to be part of the group that continues to push the envelope and continues to get people to know who we are, whether it's chefs, farmers, wine producers, mixologists, hospitality experts. because we've been the backbone of this for many, many, many years.
And going back to the rice, obviously, as we talked about earlier, where are those emerging rice developing regions here in the states?
Um, well, rice can pretty much grow anywhere where there's water in a marsh. At one given point, you could an astronaut could be in space and look down on Earth and see the thousands of rice farms that are located not only here in the states but throughout the world. Of course, we have to talk about Africa, and then if we talk about other strains, Asia, so on and so forth. So they're out there, and a big producer here in our state, or at least two of them, would be, Anson Mills, which is a mill out in Colombia, and then you have Marsh Hen out in James Island, who are producing some really great, Carolina Gold rice, and they're also producing, these heirloom grains that were cultivated by enslaved Africans hundreds and hundreds of years ago. So they're out there. People just need to or want to have the the passion to find them, and when they do find them, use their stuff. Tell other people about their product. That's the only way it's going to get out.
Absolutely. And another product that obviously is notable here in the Low Country is pimento cheese. But you said that, listen, you said, quote, pimento cheese is more of a Georgia thing. When did you discover that as a chef?
Well, we discovered that as we were researching, writing for the book.
Wow.
And a really cool thing we did was when David and I announced that we were writing this book, we posted on Facebook the list of things that we were going to write about, and we asked people to chime in and, offer suggestions on things that they think we should write about. And pimento cheese was in the top three, and then we had to kind of go back and let people down easy and explain to them that pimento cheese is not South Carolina. Now, the pimento cheese hamburger is South Carolina. It was a restaurant in Colombia, and the name escapes me right now, that was the first restaurant to put pimento cheese on a burger. But the peppers, the perfection pepper that was grown in Georgia was the pepper that was used to make pimento cheese. So you have that, and people also were asking about fried chicken. Well, fried chicken is more of a Virginia thing, and pecan or pecan pie, however you pronounce it, is Texas, right? And a lot of people were also confused at the fact that we wrote about peaches, and everyone assumes that Georgia is the peach state, and Georgia is not. South Carolina produces 3 to 4 times more peaches in the state than anywhere in the state of Georgia. So we had to include peaches in the writing of this book.
Wow. What else did you discover in your research for this book?
Well, we looked at doing the research and writing the specific things in 3 ways. We wanted to include the ingredients and the dishes that people know hands down. Like, as soon as you say South Carolina, you're going to know of course, it's Carolina Gold rice, or it's going to be this ingredient. The other thing was we wanted people to research and read about the things that have disappeared from the landscape of food. And, one in particular would be the groundnut cake, which was a cake made of peanuts and molasses, and it was sold by slave women in the market. And at one point, the city of Charleston outlawed the sale of these candies in open market because the sugars would bring flies, and of course would make things unsanitary. So, for those of you who hopefully go out and purchase the book, there's an old lithograph of a woman holding a tray of these candies in one hand, and holding a fly swatter in the other hand. Right. So we wanted to write those things that once again have disappeared. And then we also looked at the things that people would be surprised and would not associate South Carolina with. So, a couple things, asparagus. Even for me writing the book and talking to David about, well, why are we writing about asparagus? When I think of asparagus, I'm thinking, France with hollandaise sauce or whatever. But we soon learned that South Carolina was a cheap growing state for asparagus, the palmetto asparagus that was actually shipped to New York to be cooked and sold in restaurants in New York by some of the most famous chefs in New York. We write about oranges and things. Of course, when I think of oranges, I'm thinking sun-kissed, sunshine state. I'm thinking Florida, things like that. But there are really great. One of the really great things about writing this book is discovering those things that are not in our minds initially tied to South Carolina, but researching and learning that South Carolina is a great place for a lot of these things that people don't normally associate with the state.
What else have you discovered about South Carolina doing your research for this book?
I mean, the main thing is just discovering that South Carolina has a rich history as it relates to food. A lot of times people look at Southern food or the South, kind of with the with an evil eye, like they don't understand Southern food and why like now people are like, why is Southern food on the map? Well, Southern food is once again just like the Gullah Geechee culture is. It's the truest form of food, and it has so much history attached to it that it should be set up on the pedestal, just like when we talk about French cuisine or Italian cuisine or Spanish cuisine. It's in the same realm.
Wow. What does Southern food mean to you, Chef?
Southern food to me is life. Southern food to me is love. I mean, I've moving to South Carolina 13 years ago has allowed for me to really embrace the culture, really embrace the food. I lived in Georgia for 2 years, so I got a small taste of that when I was there. But really coming here and digging deep into the history and tying it to the people, and then also looking at the ingredients. So it's life, it's love, it's just who I am as a chef today.
And you mentioned some of the foods and some of the recipes. What new recipes do you want to incorporate with some of the contemporary recipes when it comes to Southern food?
Well, I mean, I want to definitely have people really bring back black eyed peas, sea island red peas, but look at cooking them in a different way, or cooking them with different things than what we are normally used to. I have a recipe in the book where I'm making black eyed peas and I'm mixing it with greens and coconut milk and curry and
Wow.
cayenne, and
Right.
I'm doing that for one, to honor my grandmother, since those were the first things she's taught me to cook, and then to honor enslaved Africans by using the spices, because a lot of people have to understand that Charleston is a coastal city, so these spices would have been coming into the coast of South Carolina, of Charleston, and these enslaved people would have had access to them. So of course they were using them in the cooking of their food.
Evolved recipes has changed your style in the kitchen.
Um, yeah, I think the evolution of recipes has allowed for me to teach my students in a different way. Getting them to honor, of course, the foundation, the traditional recipe of where something comes from, but also looking at it and evolving it and making it something that's a little bit more contemporary, but still holding true to what it was or what it is.
Mm. What is it really in your mind?
Um, what is Southern food?
Well, yes, yes, you can talk about yeah.
Well, in my mind, Southern food is it's about tradition. It's about ingredients.
Mhm.
It's about the passing down from generation to generation. These recipes that we know a lot of enslaved people never really wrote down. And
Mm.
so understanding how we cook with our eyes, our heart, our nose, and our ears.
Well, let me ask you this: if you had one part 40 years ago, what dish would you create now?
Ooh. I would. I mean, once again, I would stay partial to peas. I would stay
Okay.
partial to greens, um, because those things are the foundation. Like when we talk about greens, we talk about pot liquor, like
Yes.
that liquor that's left in the pot after the greens have been cooked, and
Right.
we find out that that liquor is probably the most nutritious part of that pot of greens, and
Mm.
how slave owners would eat the greens and then give the liquor to their enslaved, but how the enslaved were able to, with their ingenuity, use that, take that, feed themselves, sustain themselves by dipping pieces of cornbread in it, and still understanding where that flavor, how the flavor of the liquor comes about by cooking the greens in with a smoked pork product, or even today, a lot of people are trying to move away from pork
Mm.
to smoked turkey product, or instead of using, if you're vegetarian, you can use smoked paprika. You can, you can smoke onions in a smoker,
Mm.
and still get that smokiness without the pork or without protein at all.
Mm. Wow, wow. Speaking of today, chef, what will be the renaissance of ingredients 5, 10 years from now?
Um, I think. Well, I mean, of course, here okra is definitely on the rise,
Yes.
and we write about it in the book how okra is this thing that you love to hate because of the mucusy texture that it has.
Right.
But people here in the South love okra. People in the North are not necessarily partial to it because they just don't get it.
Huh.
Fortunately for me, being from the North, um, my grandmother from the South would cook okra for me all the time. So okra is nothing new to me. But I think okra will continue. I think looking at bene or bene seeds, and not looking at them just as the bene seed wafer, but understanding how they used to, and how it produces this really great oil
Mm.
that you can cook with, or how you can grind it and turn it and fold it into a pot of greens, or grind it into a flour and use it in baking. And I think that is, and that's one of my favorite ingredients. I like to use bene seeds. I like to use the oil in so many different ways. I think also in the case of okra, we start to look at okra seeds,
Oh, yes.
grinding whole okra into flour, or even okra seed oil, which is a beautiful fragrant oil, excuse me, that you can cook with as well.
Wow. That's amazing. I learned a lot there. Which new Southern food chef describes you as a chef?
Oh, I mean, I think I embody all Southern chefs. Um, I my mentor is a chef from Savannah, Chef Joe Randall, who he was an educator. He worked in hotels and restaurants in up in Pittsburgh and other places in Pennsylvania. He had a really great cooking school in Savannah. He was been my mentor since I was 18 years old when I first entered in the culinary school. He's been claimed the dean of Southern cuisine. Um, and then I think I embody not only him, but I embody Nat Fuller. I embody some of the great chefs of today. I think embodying those from the past and those of today, make me who I am. Because I always want to, once again, honor the past, but also still honor what we are doing today and what we could be doing tomorrow.
And I want to go back to your book, Taste the State, South Carolina's Signature Foods, Recipes, and Their Stories. What do you think South Carolinians, as far as tasting, will taste in the next 5 to 10 years?
I think, well, we're definitely going to hopefully have this renaissance of, the ground nut cake,
Mm.
Benny seeds in different applications outside of the Benny seed wafer. We write about, the Tanya root, which was something that was pretty popular many, many years ago. There's, red horse bread, there's
Huh.
red chicken stew,
Huh.
things that come from, the Midlands and up in the Dutch Fork and things like that.
Yes.
So I think that I hope that people, when they read the book, get inspired to cook some of those dishes and kind of go back in time and honor that red chicken stew for what it is or what it was. Honor this Benny seed oil and okra and of course purlus for rice. Rice is always going to be at the forefront, I think, for me.
Wow, that's just amazing. Well, D Chef Kevin Mitchell, thank you so much for your time, and again, welcome to the award-winning Quintin's Close-Ups.
Thank you so much.
Well, you're very welcome.